Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Ifama Odunlami. I'm an immigration attorney from the Odunlami law firm, and I am happy to come in today with a really important topic. So, if you are an immigrant, you know an immigrant, married to an immigrant, uh, this is a good video to listen to because I have some really good stuff to share with you guys. So if this is your first time joining me, please be sure to let me know so I can say hello to you. And for those of you joining me wherever you are, please tell me where you're joining from. And let's get started. So, guys, I want to talk about marriage fraud. Marriage fraud. And so, this is a really important topic because it has lasting consequences. Lasting consequences. So, um, let me introduce myself again. For those who do not know me, my name is Ifama Odunlami. I'm an immigration attorney right here in New Jersey, but my law firm serves clients in all 50 states. Hi, Damian, first time. Thank you. Mercy from Georgia. So, we handle immigration cases. That's all we do, family-based, humanitarian-based, and we do some deportation defense as well. So the reason I want to talk about this topic, the reason I'm bringing this topic is because in the past couple of weeks, I've had consultations regarding this. And it's really important that people understand what marriage fraud is about. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about, marriage fraud. So, so when USCIS denies a marriage-based case, right? They could deny it based on the fact that you don't have enough evidence, or maybe you didn't respond to an RFE, or maybe your prior marriage, your divorce was not properly terminated. There are many reasons to deny an I-130 petition in a marriage case, right? So, but the thing you want to look out for is if the denial or the notice of intent to deny makes mention of INA section 204C. Listen, guys, if F around and find out was a word, it would be 204C. And why do I say that? Because 204C is a charge of a sham marriage. That's a finding of a sham marriage by USCIS. And it has lasting consequences. It is a permanent bar. Permanent bar. I say it a lot of times to people that come in here that I want them to be aware that the marriage has to be legit, it has to be real. And I think people just think because, that it's not a big deal because they know people who have done it. But I want you to know, and I want anybody that who's involved in marriage, sham marriage, to know that there is a consequence of a permanent bar. And when I say permanent bar, it means that they can never get a green card. There are no waivers to 204C. And so let's talk about how a 204C presents itself, right? When I say it's a permanent bar, I can give you a couple of examples, right? For instance, your non-citizen is married, marriage number one. They go for an interview. USCIS makes a finding that it's a sham marriage. It was a marriage entered into to evade immigration laws, right? Section 204C. And of course, the non-citizen may not be aware of the consequence of 204C, and they think it's just a denial and they keep it moving. Then say 10, 15, 20 years later, they get married again, or they have a US citizen child who wants to file a petition for them. So the US citizen child or the US citizen spouse or the US citizen parent files a petition, and it's denied based on the I-130 is denied based on 204C. Or it could even be an employer, right? It's denied because of 204C. So USCIS will deny a petition from a subsequent petition based on a previous marriage that they made a 204C finding. And the sad thing is that a lot of people don't understand how significant that finding is, that 204C finding. Because if they did, they would appeal it, they would fight it. Because if you have a 204C finding, you should fight it. Because USCIS is not right all the time. A lot of times, USCIS is predisposed to finding fraud where the marriage doesn't make sense to them, or because they seem to think people have to have the particular type of marriage. You have to live together, you have to have bills together, you have to have a joint bank account, you have to, but a lot of marriages are not that way. Some people don't live together, but it doesn't mean it's not a real marriage, right? But as far as USCIS is concerned, if you don't live together, you have to have a seriously strong reason for not living together. So a lot of people, especially people who are in a real bona fide marriage, they take it for granted, like, oh, it's a real marriage, we don't have to prepare. They go for the interview, they ask them questions. A lot of times they may not remember stuff. And those are the things that trigger USCIS to be suspicious that it's a fake marriage. And a lot of times it's not. But you go in and they ask you a question, maybe about your husband's family member that you don't know anything about because your husband doesn't talk about them, and they immediately think, well, why won't you know about this? But you don't explain why. You're not ready to answer those questions because you didn't prepare. And so they get suspicious. And a lot of times, another thing that USCIS would do is their fraud finding, because there is a fraud finding, right? Where they go to where you claim you lived with your spouse, and they ask the neighbors, do you know, they take a picture, do you know this couple? Have you seen them together? Do they live together? Which would be great if their fraud finding was not years later after the couple would have moved, after their new neighbors. So they take that information, which is now dated, they rely on that dated information, and they make a fraud finding. And then the non-citizen gets a denial, but at that time, maybe that marriage is not working anymore. Maybe they've divorced the person and they think it doesn't matter because they're with somebody else, and they keep it moving. But you need to know this. If your denial has a 204C, you need to pay attention and you want to fight it. All right. So another way that USCIS will do a 204C finding and deny somebody of getting legal status is naturalization. Yeah. So you're a US citizen, you think it's all good, you got your green card through marriage to either a US citizen or green card holder, and you have your green card and you're coasting free, and you're like, you know what, let me go and naturalize and become a US citizen. I need to tell you guys, naturalization is not as simple as it looks. This is a chance by the government to review, your case all over again. And I'm not advocating for people to break the law, but we find that a lot of times USCIS is wrong. They make mistakes, they make assumptions about relationships, right? And it has adverse impacts. So if you are applying for naturalization, right, you need to be prepared that they may be asking you questions about how you got your green card, because sometimes, like I said, they do a fraud investigation, but it's not timely. And at this point, you have your green card, maybe you're now, so at the time they're ready to provide this information, they may think, you know what, at naturalization, we'll check it out again. So I've had a couple of consultations, very, very sad. You have people who, like, there was somebody who came, he got married many years ago, maybe it was like 20 years ago, to his girlfriend from college, but the relationship didn't last. They had no money, so they didn't really think about joint documents and all that, because he filed and then it didn't work out, and I think they had no documents together, or maybe at the time that they came for the interview, they were separated. They didn't have enough information about whatever was going on, and so USCIS decided it was a sham marriage, right? Many years later, like 10, 15 years later, he gets married to another US citizen, has like 4 kids, and the US citizen files and the case is denied, and he's put in deportation proceedings because of the first marriage many years ago. And of course, it's hard to prove that that marriage was a real marriage because it's history. It's a long time ago. And it's not like these days when we have cell phones and we have pictures from God knows what. Back then, if you had pictures of a spouse, you took it with a Polaroid and you saved it. And then, of course, when you move from one place to the other, you abandon it because this person is no longer important in your life. Maybe your current girlfriend does not want to see pictures of the old girlfriend. So you abandon everything that had to do with that. So how do you begin to fight that 10, 15 years later? So the thing to do is, if you get a denial of your marriage case, you want to see what the denial is based on. If it's based on 204C, you need to talk to an attorney so you can determine whether you can fight this. Okay? Now, the good news is this, right? There's several cases that came down the pipeline, and I'm going to just go over it with you real quick, that has put the government they have their own, they have to prove the fraud. In the past, they would just allege fraud, and they wouldn't even share the information sometimes with the petitioner or the citizen, and and then it sticks. It's a permanent bar. But subsequent case laws have made it such that the government must provide the information that they're relying on for the fraud finding, and they must also not only provide the evidence they're relying on, but they must also what is the word? Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. They also have to realize that the petitioner, who's a U.S. citizen, has a liberty interest in getting this information, right? So I'm going to go through these 4 cases real quick. And the first case is U.S. v. Cardozo, which is the case that talks about a marriage petition. How do you prove it's a bona fide marriage, right? And the standard of proof that is required in proving that it's a bona fide marriage is called the preponderance of the evidence, which means it's more like which means that the evidence you have provided shows that it's more likely than not that the marriage is a bona fide marriage, right? So they look at the evidence you've provided, and if they can determine that it's more likely than not, right? So more likely than not is something like maybe it's something like this: more likely than not, okay? That it's a bona fide marriage. And the second case is Matter of Singh, which is a 2019 case that says USCIS must provide substantial and probative evidence of a finding of fraud, right? And the next case, which is Ching versus Mayorkas, says as the petitioner in this type of cases has a due process interest, has a liberty interest, right, in having their family member that they're petitioning for get status. And therefore, they must provide this information to them. They have a right. It's marriage, due process, fundamental human rights. So they must provide the evidence to the U.S. citizen, that the evidence that they're relying on to show that, to indicate that the previous marriage of the non-citizen was fraud. They must provide it so that it can be rebutted, right? And then the last case that just came up, which was, I think it was in a couple of years ago, Matter of Zareski, actually goes a step further in saying that the government must provide derogatory evidence in connection with any fraud findings in a 204C case. So that is amazing, and that is great news. And not only does the court find that, it says that the standard that they're going to use is substantial and probative, right? They must have substantial and probative evidence that the marriage is fraudulent. So they can't just pick something, out of the hat, oh, the person said this, or we found out that they didn't live together. You must have substantial and probative evidence, which means it's more likely than not that it's a fraudulent marriage, right? And so today I want to talk to people who get involved in these sham marriages. The consequences are so dire. Don't do it. As I tell people, the only person who's going to get into real serious trouble is the non-citizen, because you have a permanent bar, right? So don't let anyone convince you that that's the way to go, because there are other ways to get your legal status. And always it's better to have a hope of getting a legal status, even if you're currently undocumented, than to not have any hope at all ever, because you've gotten involved in a 204C marriage case and have a 204C finding, right? And another thing is, for those who have gotten a 204C finding, take it serious. Don't play with that. That is like I said, if F around and find out was a word, that's it. It is such a, punitive law, 204C, because there's no chance, your children cannot file for you, your new spouse cannot file for you, your I-130 will be denied. I did a consult with somebody who there was a 204C finding, and I did believe that it was a valid marriage, because it happened such a long time ago when people didn't really pay attention to evidence, or maybe I think in her case there was a lot of abuse in that relationship, right? It was a lot of psychological abuse, where the U.S. citizen refused to put her name on records, refused to put get a joint bank account, refused to do a lot of things, right? And typically immigrants, they don't have a lot of money, so she didn't have a lot of money. She was, I think, a student, so I think she was relying on the fact that it was a bona fide marriage. She knew it was a bona fide marriage. They had dated. And this was back in days that if you take pictures, you had to take it by Polaroid. So she didn't have a whole lot of pictures, right? Because, when that finding was made, she didn't find it. She didn't fight it because she didn't understand what it was, right? Now, sometimes you have the U.S. citizen write a letter to USCIS saying it's a fake marriage, right? Even though it's not. That's part of the abuse, right? So if you are in a relationship where you have a U.S. citizen who's been abusive, refusing, saying that they're going to say it's a fake marriage when they go for the interview, say that send letters to USCIS. We've had cases like that, and we've won those cases because we were able to show that it was a bona fide marriage, but this was an abusive spouse trying to make sure that their spouse did not get their legal status. All right. So now, when you're filing for marriage petition or when you're filing for naturalization, honestly, if you have any contact with USCIS, you really want to do it the proper way. Okay. Don't take it for granted, because I think that's I see it on the comments in my reels. If it's a real marriage, you have nothing to worry about. Well, I wish that was true, but that's not true, because a lot of times, if USCIS has a sense that something is off, right, and it just may be a suspicion based on you having an atypical marriage, they go down a path where they begin to suspect that it's a fake marriage. And I honestly, I cannot tell you how many people have come to my office that have been denied, and we've had to rework the case and present evidence that USCIS is overlooking. Like they deny these cases, they'll point to this, but they won't point to something that is so evident of a real marriage, because they're focusing on all the things that to them indicates that it's not a real marriage. So getting an attorney with experience who is ready to go to bat for you is really important. But even if you decide to do it yourself, there's so much information out there. I do a lot of lives. You want to make sure that you're prepared. Don't just show up and think, oh, I know it's a real marriage, so therefore we're going to be fine. It's your burden. You need to show it's a real marriage, right? And you need to show this by a preponderance of the evidence, right? And you need to prep with your spouse, because you'd be surprised that people forget certain things, and especially the things that men don't remember, like the first date. Truly, they don't. Women tend to be the ones that keep all this information. So you go with your spouse and they ask you for the first date, and he says October, and you're like, it might have been August, and boom, USCIS is like fake marriage. So before you go for your interview, you need to at least connect and remember when you first met. How did you meet? And a lot of times there's some confusion as to when you actually met. Some, especially in these days of online dating, somebody may think the day we met was the day you slid into my DM and said hello. Another person may think it's the day we met in person at Starbucks, right? The same question goes to who proposed. How did they propose? Now, I had a client who felt that the proposal was the day the ring was produced, because as far as she's concerned, that's the day I knew you were serious. Because all the other time you were saying, we're going to get married, we're going to get married. Yeah. And the guy is thinking, well, I remember the first day I felt this is the woman for me and I'm going to marry her was the day we went to your mother's Thanksgiving, and I loved your family. I wanted to be a part of it, and I was like, this is it for me. And so you have to come to an understanding of when your relationship became serious, who proposed, when the proposal was done, and don't guess at answers, right? Because sometimes you feel compelled to give an answer because you feel if I don't give an answer, it's going to look like it's fake. Or they may ask you, what did you give your spouse for Christmas? And you're like, oh boy, I don't want to act like we didn't give anybody anything. So I'm just going to say I bought her a bottle of perfume, just because you're kind of a little embarrassed that you didn't give each other anything, right? So it's important to be truthful. It's important to go over important things, which they always ask. You can be guaranteed at an interview, they're going to ask you, how did you meet? Who proposed to who? The wedding, who was there? Where do you live? And a lot of times about your daily routine, right? So, like I said, I hope this video is, makes an impact on somebody. If there's somebody out there trying to do a sham marriage, I hope you watch this video and reconsider. The consequences are too dire. If you're somebody who's filing a petition, you want to take it seriously because you want to show up and be prepared to put your petition through. If you're going for a naturalization interview and you got your green card through marriage, you probably want to, hire an attorney. Is not as easy as it looks like, to make sure that, there are no issues that could be problematic for you at a naturalization interview. And James Tay says, we're glad to hear that. Great, James. So I'm going to answer a couple questions, and then I will go. So I'm not seeing questions yet, but let's see. You guys, I tell you all that Instagram, the prints are so small. So Ekene says, I need a consultation. How can I do so? Ekene, you can call the firm 973-993-1900 and schedule a consultation, or you can self-schedule by going to our website, www.odunlamilaw.com. And typically we're really booked out. So if you want something closer, we have cancellations sometimes. So you might call the office and see if you can get something closer. Okay. Looking forward to talking to you. All right. And Miss Wallace Shape says, good evening. I'd like a date for consultation. Miss Wallace Shape 1, same thing. Call my office 973-993-1900 or self-schedule. There's somebody out there who's trying to duplicate my Instagram account. So you guys just make sure that you're following the Odunlami law firm that is verified, not the one that has 0 followers and 0 topics or whatever. So make sure it's me. I think we have over 56,000 followers. We're verified, so it has the blue check. So make sure you're talking to the right firm. And the phone number to call is 973-993-1900. When you become a client, we have a different number because, you're working directly with us. So, but for right now, to make a consultation, that's the number, 973-993-1900. So looking down to see if I can find any question. Ikechukwu says, can asylees naturalize to full citizen? Of course, Ikechukwu, an asylee can naturalize to full citizen. You can apply to get your green card a year after you've been granted your asylum, and 5 years after that, you can apply to become a U.S. citizen. All right. So Teethers and Toddlers says, my I-130 and I-4885 has been pending in Virginia for 16 months and inquiry has been sent, but still nothing. What do you advise? So Teethers, the first thing to do is go to the case processing website and see how long it's taken, because it really differs from location to location. If your case processing has been passed and you still haven't gotten a response, then you can start by doing the inquiry, which you said you've done, congressional assistance, call your congressman. But if you really want results, you have to sue the government. File a writ of mandamus, get an attorney, and you will get a response, okay? A lot of people are afraid to file a writ because they think there's going to be consequence, that they're going to be denied because they sue the government. That is not true. So the suit is against the government just to get them to move their case because it's taking too long and it's past processing times, and you have a right to sue, and there's no repercussions on that. So don't be afraid. So let's keep moving. God bless Sierra Leone says, I'm a green card holder. I want to file for my spouse. How long does that take? So God bless Sierra Leone. It depends on many factors. So if your spouse is outside the United States, it's going to take a long time. It's probably because the priority date is not current anymore. You're really looking at maybe 3, 4, 5 years from start to finish. If your spouse is here in the United States, then your spouse has to be in legal status, and for you to be able to file, and they have to stay in legal status, all right? Because the priority date is not current. So if you have any more questions, feel free to call my office, 973-993-1900. All right, let's go to the next question. So Abaolet says, I filed for my wife since August 2022, and she lives abroad. Since then, we have not been approved yet. Is it normal for it to take this long? Do we have to take any action? What do I have to do? So Abaolet, it really depends. It does take a while for cases to be approved, quite frankly, but it depends on where you're filing from. So go to case processing website and take a look at that and see whether your case is past processing times. And if it is, then do what I told the other person to do, which is e-inquiry, congressional assistance, and ultimately sue the government. We love to sue the government. So let's keep going. So Oko Abefe says, my wife filed as a green card holder for you, but now she has been given a date for her naturalization interview. Will your wait time be reduced when she becomes a citizen? Yes. So when your wife becomes a citizen, she needs to notify National Visa Center that you're no longer F2A. You're now an immediate relative, which means that there's a visa available for you right away. So it will reduce your wait time. So wish your wife the best with her naturalization interview. Okay, guys, I gotta go soon. So one more question. Ajibola says, please, ma, verify if the Filipino can give me your account details. I'm not really sure what you're asking. How about you call my office? I'm not sure what you're asking. but we have people that answer our phones, and if they're giving my account details to you, yes, they can. But if you're not sure, you can go to my website and book directly, www.odunlamilaw.com. You can book directly, make your payment directly, and then you can call my office and see if you can get a closer date. Okay, that might be one, because I'm not really sure what your question is, but I'm thinking that should answer the question anyway. All right. So Yomi Babson says, why are they waiving interviews now? So Yomi, because of COVID and because of the prior administration, where in the prior administration they called every single body for an interview, so it created a backlog. And then COVID came, and USCIS, DOS were working at lower capacity. I think it was like 40 or 60%, which means that they were not working on certain types of cases. There are not a lot of people, it was just a mess because of COVID. So USCIS has really been struggling and working really hard. I have to commend them that they've been working really hard trying to move cases along. And one of the ways they're moving those cases are waiving interviews when it's apparent to them that it looks like it's a good case, it's a bona fide marriage, there are no inadmissibilities, so approve them. And of course, as you know, they get a chance to check up on that relationship either when you file to remove the conditions, if that's the kind of green card you got, or when you file to naturalize, they can always check back up. But right now, they're moving cases, approving, waiving interviews, approving cases. And so if you want to file, this is a time to file. All right. So let me answer a question from YouTube. Jennifer Williams says, hello, good evening. Can you check for an update on your USCIS status? If you have a lawyer or it's only your lawyer can do so. Jennifer, it depends. If you have a VAWA case and you have a lawyer, only your lawyer can do so, really, and because they will not respond to a phone call or anything. However, if you have your own case, you can always go on the check, put in your receipt number and check it. So that's really it. Depends on the type of case you have. All right, so. So this is a really great question. So let me answer it. And that's the last question. So 876 TJG special 876 says, can a husband who owes taxes and is retired file for his wife? So this is a great question, and it depends. I'm going to tell you certain factors that you should look at. So if you owe taxes, right, that's not a problem as long as you're on a payment plan and you've been filing your taxes, regularly, right? So owing taxes does not, stop you from filing for your wife. It just means that you need to show that you're in a payment plan with the government. So typically, USCIS would have no problem with that. Now, if you're retired, then there's something called an affidavit of support. So you have to make sure that maybe you have income from other means, right? You have to make sure you meet the poverty guidelines for the income requirement, and if you don't, you can use assets, right? There's a calculation for that, and if you don't have any of that, you can get a joint sponsor, right? That is somebody who's a U.S. citizen or green card holder who meets the requirements for the affidavits of support, and they can be a joint sponsor, and you can file for your wife. So that wouldn't be a problem at all. I wouldn't worry about that. Just make sure you get the information you need and the help you need, and you should be good to go. All right, guys. Thank you. I got to run because I got to go pick up my son from the bus stop. I will be back next week, and have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.